Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is the GSMC Football Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host. You guys already know who it is, but it's your boy Kayvon Izami. You can get out and reach me on Twitter at Kayvon_sports and hit us up on the GSMC Football Twitter page as well at GSMC_football. Man, I hope everyone's having a great day. Hope everyone's having a lovely day, really enjoying their week. As I record this, we're only 2 days into the week, but hey, 2 days in, a lot of people are having a shorter week because we have the Labor Day weekend coming up. So for all of you that have some plans this weekend, enjoy it, have some fun. I know it's not like usual, usually when we have that Labor Day weekend, you guys know what it is, right? You guys and girls, come on, it's football season. It's college football season. I mean, I think for the longest time, me and my good friends, we would always plan Labor Day weekend out as, so Saturday we are waking up early, getting together by 11 a.m., and we're watching football till midnight. See, this is the funny thing about college football. Well, it's the awesome thing about college football on the East Coast. And I bet it's vice versa on the West Coast, but on the East Coast, you have games starting at noon, which is a normal time, and then we have what we like to call the Pac-12 after dark, which is really funny because I actually have a couple friends over that in Utah that live in the West Coast, Mountain Time Zone, Pacific Time Zone, and when they came to visit here during football season last year, I was telling them how, because they're Pac-12 fans, they're Utah fans, I was like, we call the Pac-12 here Pac-12 after dark, and they thought that was hilarious because it's always been known, it's always kind of been that stigma that the Pac-12 ratings, no one would really watch them because no one would really know how good Oregon is until the end of the season because their games would be on so late, and which is true. A lot of people that don't like to stay up, they wouldn't mess with those games, but when you're younger, you're still in that, that mode of where you want to have some beers and watch football with your buddies and drink some beers all day, that we live for that. I mean, we live for that, knowing that, it's 10 o'clock, like, what are we going to do now? Oh, wait, we've got a Pac-12 after dark game starting in 30 minutes at 10:30. It's unfortunate we're not going to have those this year. It's unfortunate that we're not going to have football on Labor Day weekend, probably like the first time in I don't know how long. And I do think we actually are getting a couple of college football games like we did last week when we got that one Austin P game. But, it's not the big dog games. It's not that usual where you get the big dog games. That Alabama USC game, I think that was going to be week 1 this year. Alabama most likely would have pounded up on USC, but still, those type of games, especially since the college football season or college football playoff has started, those week 1 has just been tremendous because these teams want to play good teams to impress that college football committee. But, we're not going to get that this year, but it's all right because we're going to get NFL, baby. We are going to get NFL, and guess what? We're officially 3 shows away. So we have this show and then 2 more shows until football starts. Until we will be officially breaking down games on here. We'll be talking about what happened, who won this, who won that, who choked, who's starting off the season hot, how are my predictions looking. I mean, we are 3 shows away, ladies and gentlemen, and I hope you can hear the excitement in my voice because I can see the excitement, I can feel the excitement coming through this microphone every time you guys listen to this show, and I can't even imagine what it's going to be like once we get this season underway and rolling. So we always appreciate the support, and we hope that you guys keep supporting us and get excited to come and listen to our show after every Sunday. It's perfect because we drop shows Wednesday morning and Sunday morning. So you know what that means, right? The games, the Tuesday night, Tuesday afternoon when I record, that will be breaking down the previous week games, the Sunday and the Monday Night Football, looking ahead to Thursday Night Football, and then the Saturday will be talking about, previewing those Sunday games and that Monday night game. So it's perfect. It's perfect timing. I can't wait for it, and I hope you guys can't wait either. So you know what we're going to do? I thought about this. Since we have 3 more episodes, baby, until the season's ready to go, I thought that we'll do something cool here. I thought that we will, for the next 3 shows, we're going to end the shows in a certain way. And this isn't going to be our entire 4th segment that we like to do where we like to do something fun. We're just going to end our 4th segment a little bit early and use the last 5 minutes of that show, of these last 3 shows, to talk about the top 10 NFL players going into this 2020 season. All players involved here, QBs, wide receivers, tight ends, running backs, defensive ends, you name it. I mean, defensive players, every single player is involved here. And what we're going to do is we're going to name you the 10 best NFL players coming into 2020. And so this show will give you 10, 9, and 8. Next show will give you 7, 6, and 5. And then the final show will give you the top 4, 3, 2, 1, top 4 players entering the 2020 NFL season right before that opening night game, Houston Texans, Deshaun Watson battling in Kansas City against Patrick Mahomes and the defending champs. All right, so we'll get you guys, hyped up for that. See if some of your favorite players, some of your teams are involved. Some of the players on your teams are involved in those top 10, and see what you think about it. All right, so for today's show, though, we're going to do a bunch of different storylines, a bunch of NFL storylines. There aren't really that many big topics recently that have come out, but there are a lot of intriguing ones and ones to, pay attention to. So we're going to start with the Leonard Fournette and the Jaguars news. And, Jacksonville, if you guys haven't heard, I'm sure you all have, Jacksonville Jaguars have released the former number 4 overall draft pick in Leonard Fournette. We will discuss what this means for both sides and what the heck is going on in Jacksonville in general. After that, we will dive into a couple different things. The unfortunate news coming out of Chargers training camp about Derwin James suffering another injury that is going to sideline him 6 to 8 months. That is just a really, really unfortunate news that I hate to see it happen. It's to such a young player. That's 2 injuries back to back, and he is, I don't want to talk about it like he won't be anymore, but that's really 2 tough injuries, back-to-back years, and he was on his way to becoming one of the best safeties in the league if he wasn't already there. And I fully believe he can get back, but this is a tough blow for him and a tough blow for that Chargers organization. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about the comments that Bill Belichick has recently made about Cam Newton and how I hear a different message that Bill Belichick is saying than what others are hearing. Then to wrap up, what we're going to do is, since week 1 is officially almost here, the Vegas lines are out, the numbers are out, we know what teams are favored, we know what teams are underdogs, we know by how much. So because of that, I thought what we'll do is we'll do the most intriguing week 1 storylines. We know the matchups, we know the numbers, we know the favorites, and we're not talking about necessarily the best matchups. We're talking about the best storylines. What catches our eye the most week 1? And we'll give you a couple of those, so stay tuned for that. But before I get into what is going on with Jacksonville and Leonard Fournette, I want to talk about this recent news real quick that the NFL just announced. And it announced it a couple days ago, but for some reason, it hasn't really been picking up as much steam as I thought it would be. And I'm not really sure why that is, but we talked about it last episode, right? And that is that we talked about the whole Washington football organization going through another scandal, right? I mean, another investigation. What does that mean for the organization, right? We went through all of that. We talked about now that Daniel Snyder's involved in this investigation and these allegations. What does that mean moving forward? And we said the biggest question in all of this is, what does that mean for the NFL? Will the NFL get involved in this? That was the question I kept asking, right? Well, it's come out now that the NFL has announced that they will be officially taking over the investigation for the Washington franchise and the newest allegations that have come up. So the NFL is going to take control of this investigation now. So remember, it was Daniel Snyder that hired an outside law firm to conduct the investigation, but the NFL has now decided to step in and do their own investigation, their own research on the investigation and the allegations about Daniel Snyder and others that are involved. And I love this. I am glad the NFL is doing this. This organization has had so much going on this offseason that it's time to find out the truth, right? It's time to put on the gloves, put on the mask, and no matter how dirty things might get, it's time to scrub it down and find some answers. Now, I do want to make sure people understand, just because the NFL is taking over, that doesn't mean that they will be forcing Snyder to sell the team or anything like that. I mean, it's really not that big of a change, because the law firm that was going to do the investigation was someone that the NFL actually recommended. So it's just a little change. Like, the NFL and Roger Goodell literally recommended this law firm that was going to do it. But I do believe that since Daniel Snyder is actually involved in these new allegations, I think that the NFL decided it's best for them to control this organization. I think that the NFL wanted to say, since this is an owner that is a part of our league, we need to jump in on this. But I saw a lot of people that were like, oh, this means Snyder's gone, he's gone, the NFL is going to come down hard on him. No, we don't know that at all. The NFL is just taking over because now the owner is involved in the allegations. And it makes sense. It really does. Now, if these allegations are true, then yes, the NFL needs to come down very hard. And you guys already know where I stand on this because we talked about it last episode. I think he should have to sell if these allegations are found true. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. But at this moment, the NFL is taking over the investigation. The NFL is just doing their due diligence, covering their bases, and this is common sense. It's doing the right thing. The NFL is doing this right, and I just wanted to go through that first now that news came out, because I talked about it last episode. So really, really glad that they're doing that, and let's just wait and see what happens from here. Okay? All right. So now let's move on from one organization that hasn't seen much success recently to another in the Jacksonville Jaguars. Jacksonville released Leonard Fournette, as we know that, and if you guys remember, when we did the Kayvon division tour that we did for many, many shows all across this summer, because, we wanted to give you guys our predictions, what was it that I said about Jacksonville when we talked about the AFC South? Do you guys remember that? I said that they will be the worst team in football this year, hands down. And every move they have made since has 100% backed that statement up. There's no doubt about that, right? I mean, that pick by me is looking really good, because since then, they've just shipped off all their good players pretty much. Now, I want to start by talking about the Jacksonville Jaguars organization as a whole. Then we will get into Fournette and where he fits in this and where he fits going forward. I want to first start with this notion that has been going around the last couple days. I have heard from many members on TV and sports TV, sports radio these last couple days saying that the Jaguars really need to be criticized for taking Leonard Fournette 4th overall to the point where we criticize the Bears for taking Mitchell Trubisky second overall instead of the likes of Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes. You guys all know that debate, right? So a couple things here. First, those that don't remember, we're talking about the 2017 NFL draft here. And the 2017 NFL draft is a famous one for a myriad of reasons. There are so many reasons why this draft always comes up. But one of the biggest sentiments about the draft is that the Bears royally screwed up by taking Mitchell Trubisky number 2 overall. And that's a very accurate statement, right? They screwed that up. But what's not accurate is when people say, how could they have taken Mitchell Trubisky over Patrick Mahomes? That's not a fair statement, and this is why. First of all, no one knew Mahomes was going to be this good, okay? No one knew that. Mahomes was very mediocre in college at best. He was an average quarterback. He was a turnover machine with a big arm. That's what he was at Texas Tech. He was a gunslinger that was a less than 500 quarterback in the Big 12 and turned the ball over a lot. Now, did he show a lot of physical attributes that NFL scouts and GMs loved? Yeah, of course. But he was nowhere near polished like Deshaun Watson was, okay? So I always call out people on that because it's wrong. Now, what is true is that the Bears should have taken Deshaun Watson, and so many of other teams in this draft should have done that too, over what the Bears took in Mitchell Trubisky. Watson had one of the best college careers we have ever seen. In the history of college football, he has had one of the best college careers that we have ever seen. So there is no excuse that he dropped all the way to 12th overall in that draft. And there's especially no excuse for a team in the Bears who took a quarterback that they took Trubisky over him, especially when they traded up for it. Okay, so that's one thing that I wanted to make sure of, because I always hear that, and I know that's not necessarily talking about Jacksonville, and we'll get into the Jacksonville part of this in a second, but it bugs the crap out of me when I hear that. Yes, it would have been awesome if other teams took Mahomes, right? Mahomes would be great no matter what, but I think it's fair to say that Mahomes being in the right situation with the perfect head coach, with the perfect organization, that knows how to use him the right way, and also no one saw this coming. Deshaun Watson, there was no excuse for Deshaun Watson to fall down to 12. There was no excuse at all for that. So that's one thing that I always want to make sure of. Now, back to Jacksonville, okay? I bring the 2017 draft up because Leonard Fournette was taken number 4 overall in that draft by Jacksonville, right? And now that he has been released, a lot of people are banging on Jacksonville's front office for that pick. Let me say this. They're all saying what I was just saying earlier. Oh, we should compare this to what the Ryan Pace and the GM of the Bears did with Trubisky. Let me say this first. Was it a good pick? No, not really. Would I have done that pick? No, not at all. But I'm someone who wouldn't take any running back that high in the draft, no matter what. Zeke Elliott, Saquon Barkley, doesn't matter. I'm not that. I don't take running backs that early. But I do want to say this. At least Leonard Fournette is a good player. Okay? Let's take a look at the top 10 players drafted in that 2017 NFL draft. All right, Myles Garrett went number 1 overall. Great player, one of the best pass rushers in the league already at such a young age, and has already re-upped on his second contract. Mitchell Trubisky, number 2. As we all know, that has completely failed so far. Chicago traded up to number 2, so that was even worse, and that's just been an awful, awful move. I do think that he still has some room to improve and change this history, but no matter what, it's always going to be a failed pick because Deshaun Watson, most especially, went way after him. And you can add Patrick Mahomes in that, but it's not as fair as Deshaun Watson. Number 3, Solomon Thomas. That guy has done absolutely nothing since he's gotten to the NFL. He's had 6 sacks total in all the years he's been in the NFL since 2017. Then you have Leonard Fournette, number 4. You have the Titans that took Corey Davis 5. what has he done? I mean, that is a huge reach on a wide receiver, probably one of the biggest wide receiver busts taken overall in the draft this high. Jamal Adams, good player, but has already been traded to another team. Mike Williams, the wide receiver for the Chargers, he's a good receiver. I'll give it that. He's a very good receiver. He's coming into his own more. Christian McCaffrey, you cannot argue that pick. That's been a beautiful pick by the Panthers. John Ross at number 10. I mean, come on. The guy can't stay healthy at all. Not worth the number 9 pick whatsoever. And then Patrick Mahomes at 10, which has been the biggest steal in out there for sure. So when you look at it this way, you can say what? Mike Williams, Christian McCaffrey, Patrick Mahomes are, I mean, Myles Garrett number 1, but obviously after that. So, I mean, 3, maybe 4 if you want to add Jamal Adams in there, of the players are actually somewhat good. Like, Leonard Fournette is actually a legit quarterback in this NFL. So I don't necessarily criticize them that much for the pick. Should they have taken someone else? Yes, of course. Should they have taken Deshaun Watson? Yes, of course they should have. But that's not where I'm going to go at them today. Because I'm not, that's just, I don't think that's that big of a deal. They actually made the AFC Championship that year after drafting Leonard Fournette, and he was a huge reason because of that. So, yes, it was a bad pick in hindsight, but I don't think we should criticize them to the point where a lot of these people are in that aspect. So I'm going to give them a pass there, but I'm about to get on this Jacksonville Jaguars organization, so I thought I'd give them a break there. So stay tuned. What we're going to do is we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, it's time to pull out the pitchforks. Jacksonville fans, you might not want to hear this, but you actually might want to, because something's got to change with this organization if you guys want some success. And I'm going to help that out. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after this.
Listen up, sports bettors. This is Bryson Ethan here to tell you about our favorite sports book, and that's BetUS. Football, basketball, and baseball are all back, and that means it's time to get down your bets. We only endorse one sports book, and that is BetUS.com. Why, you ask? BetUS is the pioneer in online betting with more than 25 years in the biz. You need a sports book with integrity and longevity, and you need to know that you're going to get paid.
That's right, Bryce. You need a sports book that offers everything, including live betting, MMA, golf, horses, esports, entertainment, and all kinds of crazy prop bets and futures. So call today at 1-800-MyBetUS. That's 1-800-MyBetUS, and they will walk you through getting started. Nobody in the industry gives better bonuses or bigger bonuses than BetUS. Join now, mention GSMC, and you get up to 150% in bonuses on your first deposit. Nobody beats that. We bet at BetUS, and so should you. So join BetUS today. That's BetUS.com, or call 1-800-MyBetUS, mention GSMC, and get 150% in bonuses on your first deposit.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back, everyone. This is the GSMC Football Podcast. I am your host, Kayvon. Thank you, everyone, for staying tuned and listening to the show as we enter into quarter number two. Hope everyone's having a lovely day. As I mentioned before, hope you guys all have a safe and happy Labor Day weekend coming up. Check out the GSMC Podcast Network, where we have everything under the sun, all kinds of topics, and I'm guarantee you're going to love some of the hosts and some of the topics we have there. Stay tuned for that. Of course, always you can check that out on our website and on our platforms, social media platforms, but make sure you always come back to your boy, Kayvon and the GSMC Football Podcast. So, we just dove into quarter number one about Jacksonville and what's going on, and we're just going to straight up finish it from there, right? We're going to dive into more of what's going on with Jacksonville and just really what, I mean, I don't mean to laugh, but why are they in this position? I mean, it's crazy. They are just letting go of players left and right, and good players. So we're going to dive into that because it's really something that I'm trying to wrap my head around. And I know one of my really good buddies is a Jaguar fan. And trust me, we talk all the time. And he's a true fan. He's stuck with them through thick and thin. And there hasn't been much. There hasn't been much positivity other than a couple years here and there. And he's stuck with them. So I always talk to him, see what he's thinking about his organization. And he's straight up about it. You know, there's not much to talk about in a positive manner other than they have a lot of draft picks. I mean, a lot of draft picks. And we're going to get into all of that in a second. But first, I want to do something here because it's really interesting. I don't know if some of you guys are like me, and I'm sure some of you are, but I'm a draft nerd, right? Like, I'm one of those people where come a couple years down the road, like, I'll go back and I'll look at the 2017 draft, and I'll look at it all. You know, first round, second round, all the way to the seventh round pick, undrafted. And I'll see what players are still in the league, what players hit, what players did we miss on in that draft. Like, you know, just some really interesting stuff. I love doing that. I love being able to go back and see. Because the thing about the draft is it's such an inexact science. I mean, look, some of these GMs, some of these scouts, they're there for a reason. I mean, they deserve to be general managers in the National Football League. They deserve to be scouts in the National Football League. But a lot of it is luck too. Like, let's just be honest about it. I mean, you're taking college boys. I mean, yeah, they're men, but you're taking them and you're giving them millions of dollars. You can't just predict what's going to happen. That's why we see examples like Jamarcus Russell, who have so much potential, and then they just are awful, you know? And that's why we also see, you know, people like Tom Brady, who no one even noticed or cared about, and then become the greatest player ever, the greatest quarterback ever. That's what makes an NFL draft and a draft in period in professional sports so interesting and intriguing, and especially in the NFL. Because the NFL, there's 7 rounds, there's so many players, and it gives a fan base hope. It's the smartest thing a professional sports league could have done. Because if your team sucks, halfway through the season, you can start going and working on college football and understanding college football and seeing who you're going to take for your team to make your team better, you know? You can start really doing your homework on that. And that's the fun part of all of that. And so for all you draft nerds out there, I wanted to look at this because this is really, really interesting. We were talking about the 2017 draft, right? If you go back and look at that draft now, the NFL league is just, I mean, all over the NFL landscape right now are running backs from that 2017 draft class. I mean, look at this. You had Leonard Fournette go number 4 overall. Christian McCaffrey go number 8 overall. Then we had Dalvin Cook go in the second round. Joe Mixon go in the second round, which, by the way, he just got a new contract extension today. Congrats to him. I think he got a 4-year deal, $48 million, which I'm terrible at math, but I want to say that's $12 million a year. So that, you know, that's that puts him right outside the top 5 of running backs paid in the league on an annual average. So congrats to him. That's a big move by Cincinnati, and I actually really like Joe Mixon a lot, so I think that's pretty cool. Now, you have Fournette number 4 overall, Christian McCaffrey number 8, Dalvin Cook 2nd round, Joe Mixon 2nd round, Alvin Kamara in the 3rd round, Kareem Hunt in the 4th round, James Conner in the 4th round, Aaron Jones for Green Bay in the 5th round, Tariq Cohen for the Bears in the 5th round, Marlon Mack for the Colts in the 5th round, Chris Carson for the Seahawks in the 7th round. Chris Carson was 3rd in the league last year, or top 5 in the league last year in rushing yards, and he went in the 7th round. Aaron Jones, as I said, he went in the 5th round. And then you had Matt Breida, Austin Eckler, and Corey Clement, I think it is. I don't know. I think I definitely just butchered that name. But all of them went undrafted that year. Undrafted. Austin Eckler is the main one of that. He went undrafted. That is a stacked running back draft. That's insane. I mean, almost, one, Fournette, McCaffrey, Cook, Mixon, Kamara, Hunt, Connor, Jones. I mean, all Carson, Eckler. I mean, these are all starting running backs for their organizations. Marlon Mack. I mean, Tariq Cohen. It's really probably one of the best running back class, if not the best running class back, I've ever seen. And it just goes to show. I mean, if that doesn't explain the conversation that we're having today about organizations, not us, about running backs in the NFL. Not us particularly in this show, but just we've had this on this show. It's just something league-wide now, how the value of the running back position just keeps going down and down. And if this isn't firsthand why, think about it. Look at all these players. Other than McCaffrey and Fournette is already see you later, goodbye on his first team, they all came in the 2nd round or later. There's no wonder why these organizations don't want to pay these players big bucks, because and of course this is an anomaly. You don't usually get this many players, this many good running backs in one class, but you get a lot. And that just shows why the value of drafting a running back is so down. And that's why what I said in the beginning of the show I don't draft running backs high. I don't care if you're Saquon Barkley. I don't care if you're Ezekiel Elliott. There's a position there. There's a player there that can help and impact my team more. And that's just how I believe it. And that's what I would do if I was a GM. But hey, those GMs are in there for a reason, and I'm sitting here behind a microphone for a reason. So maybe my philosophy is wrong. But let's get back to Jacksonville. And as I said before break, I give Jacksonville somewhat of a pass for the Leonard Fournette drafting. Again, I wouldn't have done it. They shouldn't have done it. But at least he is a good player. He is an NFL running back. And like I said, they ended up making the AFC Championship game that season too. And he was a big reason for that. So I don't knock that as much. Now, where I don't give them a break is pretty much everywhere else in this organization. This organization has been flat out atrocious. In my mind, it's been the worst organization in the NFL in the last 10 plus years. Take away that 2017 playoff run, that to the AFC Championship game that they had in 2017. Other than that, they've been completely irrelevant. We just talked about Washington all offseason, and what has been going over there and the dysfunction in that organization. Well, Jacksonville is also extremely dysfunctional, but in a different way. They have culture issues too, but in a different way. Because their culture issues is they have NFL players that do not want to stay and play there. Their players do not want to be there. And that shouldn't be the case. Jacksonville should be a place where players want to go and play. They have warm weather. They're in Florida. You know what that means, right? No state tax. These players make millions. They don't want state tax. They play on real grass, not turf. This is a spot that players should love to go play at. But instead it's a place where they want to leave. And keep on leaving. All of them. All the good ones. I mean, think about this. From 2012 to 2017, the Jaguars had 6 straight picks in the top 5. 6 straight picks in the top 5. Not one of those picks have made it past year 5. And it's not because the picks weren't good. That's the thing. They actually draft good players. 3 out of those 6 picks, Dante Fowler, who had 12 sacks last year on the Rams and then just signed a big contract with the Falcons that was well worth it, or well deserved, and I'm happy my Falcons have him now. Jalen Ramsey, who I would say is the best quarterback in the league other than Stephon Gilmore, and many people would agree with that. Top 3, no debate. He left. He demanded a trade. And then now Leonard Fournette, who had 1,000 yards plus rushing in 2 out of his 3 years in the league. And the only reason why he didn't have it in one of those years is because he got hurt. All 3 players are now gone. And 2 of them forced their way out. And I don't know the story about Fournette, if he forced his way out or not, or if he, I know he, taped that $100 bill on his pads and maybe that upset them. But the point is, this is a terribly run organization. What could possibly be happening to make these players hate playing there and hate being there? I don't get it. I also don't get how the general manager, David Caldwell, still has a job. You lose all of these players, but you're still the one making decisions. And I'm not someone to call for someone else's job. I don't ever want to try and call for someone's job and take their livelihood and their food off their table. But clearly Jacksonville is doing something here that does not add up. And they're doing something here where I know a lot of people in the sports world don't like using this word, but I'm going to use it because it's clear as day that Jacksonville is tanking. Jacksonville is trying to be the worst team in the league, like I predicted them to be, so that they can go and get Trevor Lawrence out of Clemson. I want to talk about this whole tanking notion now. I really do want to bring this up for a second, because tanking in football is something, tanking in sports is looked down upon, and rightfully so. But tanking in football is so much harder than tanking in other professional sports like basketball. And well, first let me take a step back and say this. Tanking is a management term and decision, okay? The players are not tanking. And for those that don't know what tanking means, tanking is a team that is setting themselves up in a bad situation going into the season so that they can hopefully end up with the first overall pick in the following year, in the draft for the following year. Okay, but again, that is coming from management, because management is the one that's making these moves. The players do not tank. The players go out there and play their hardest every single day. We saw that firsthand last year in Miami. You remember? Miami gave away last year and traded and let go of every single person that had an inch of talent on that team. I mean, goodbye, so that they could get 3 first-round picks. And guess what ended up happening? They ended up winning 5 games, and they were the 5th overall pick. They weren't even close to getting the first overall pick. Now, lucky for them, they still got Tua, because Tua got banged up, and the teams above them didn't need quarterbacks other than Cincinnati. So they got lucky, but it just shows that they literally gave away everyone. Everyone. And their first 2 games, they lost by 100 combined. And they still won 5 games, because tanking isn't something that the players do. It doesn't work very well, in particular in the NFL, because these players have pride. There's too many players involved in the game. 11 on offense, 11 on defense. They aren't going to just quit out there because management put them in a bad situation. But Jacksonville is clearly tanking to get Trevor Lawrence. There's no doubt about that. And you know what they might? They might end up getting him. Because like I said before all this happened, they're going to be a really bad team. But I'm going to throw something out there and end it on this. And this is going to turn a lot of heads, and this is something that doesn't like to be brought up either, but why in the world would Trevor Lawrence want to go to Jacksonville after all of this that he has seen. And don't think that he's not watching, okay? Just because he's in college, he knows he's a smart kid. He's a mature kid. He's one of the best prospects I've seen in a long time for the quarterback position. And he has the resume to back it up. And he understands he's going to be the first overall pick. And he's looking at these teams. And he's looking at Jacksonville. And I don't see why in the world he would find that an appealing place to go. Now, do I think in the end he will force his way like pulling Eli Manning? I'm not saying that's going to happen. You guys all remember Eli Manning? He didn't want to go to the Chargers. He said, I will not come play with you. The Chargers ended up drafting him anyways to try and call his bluff, but then they traded him to the Giants. Manning also has the last name Manning and has a lot of weight in this league. I don't see Trevor Lawrence doing this. He seems like someone that's going to be willing to take the challenge. But, man, I mean, it would scare me. I'm not going to lie. If I was Trevor Lawrence, it would scare me. It would scare me that it could possibly ruin my career by going there. And this is the thing. Something's going to have to change because it's not a good situation. And what the crazy thing to me is this. They draft well. I mean, I just read you guys the picks. They drafted Dante Fowler. They drafted Jalen Ramsey. They drafted Leonard Fournette. They drafted Yannick Ngakoue, who's a very good rusher of the quarterback. And he just forced his way out. Guys, he was just offered more money than any other team could offer him, and he still said, no, I want out. That is a problem. What is going on in that organization to make someone deny, turn down that much money? Now, I've heard the rumors. I've heard that when Tom Coughlin was there, if you were a minute late, you had to run suicides or you had to pay a hefty fine. I'm talking a minute late to morning meetings or a minute late to practice. These are grown men. Should they be on time? Of course they should. This is their job. But they're grown men. If they're late 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, you shouldn't have to make these players pay a $10,000, $20,000 fine. If it becomes a consistent thing, if they're late 20 minutes, if they're late an hour, that's a whole different story. But I was hearing that Tom Coughlin, when he was in the president role there, he was fining these players for being a minute or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 minutes late. That's ridiculous. Coughlin got let go because a lot of this was his issue. But it seems like even now, after Coughlin's left, things are still happening. Now, I don't know if these things happen and these players are still so upset that they don't care and they want to get out anyways. But there's just no excuses to it. This is an awful organization these past 10 or so years. And things got to change. And again, it should be a great organization. I mean, it's Jacksonville, Florida. They've got some pretty cool colors. Duval. They've got an awesome fan base. I mean, everybody knows the Duval. But instead, they're playing a couple games in London every year because they can't keep any good players there, so fans aren't showing up as much anymore. But when they win, we saw it in 2017, that place was packed to the brim. Packed to the brim. And they draft well. That's the crazy part about it. See, a lot of people think of Cleveland when you say the worst organization in football, right? And they're up there for sure. Cleveland's problem is they just can't draft worth crap. I mean, they can't find a good coach. They had a good GM in John Dorsey who knows how to draft, and all these players on that team now are come from him, but they just fired him because he made the wrong pick at head coach because he had to go out and pick someone that he thought he could control in Freddie Kitchens, and that was an awful pick. But the Browns just simply cannot draft. You know, they've passed on more quarterbacks that are Pro Bowlers than I can even count on both hands. The Jaguars at least can draft good players, but they can't keep them there. And to me, that might be a worse problem than not being able to draft the players. Because think about the reputation around the league right now. Players have to be imagining, why are all these players leaving Jacksonville? Why are all these players turning down generational money just so that they can leave that organization? Again, no state tax, beautiful weather, playing on grass. What am I missing? This has got to change, and if their plan works and the tanking works and they get that number 1 overall pick, from now until then, they better show Trevor Lawrence something that he can hang his hat on. That's all I have to say. This is the GSMC Football Podcast. I am your host, Kayvon Izami. Hope everyone's having a lovely day. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to dive into some more NFL topics. And remember, we are 2 segments away from the best, most intriguing, the juiciest storylines of the Week 1 season. And then to end on the show, you guys are going to get my number 10, my number 9, and my number 8 best players heading in to the NFL 2020 season. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere right after this.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Hello. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is the GSMC Football Podcast. I am your host, Kayvon Izami. You know who it is, as always, coming at you from the great studios of my bedroom. I want to thank all the hard-working people over at the GSMC studios in California that help make this show the show that it is. The ones that edit it, produce it, all of that stuff, especially my producer, Sarah. You guys do a really, really good job, so thank you to you. To the fans, to the listeners, we always appreciate you guys listening, and we're so excited for football being right around the corner, just like most of you are as well. So, moving into, coming out of halftime now, going into quarter number three, we are going to dive into a couple different things here. First of all, ESPN, they came out with their top 100 players going into the 2020 NFL season. We're doing our top 10, but they did top 100. And one player, once again, is getting so disrespected for the 100th time. And I just don't know what to do anymore. I really don't know what to do. It's ridiculous. It is ridiculous, and I just don't understand it. I don't understand why everyone wants to be wrong on this, but they do. So I'm going to have to get into that in a second. But first, just to look back on what we were just talking about in right before we came into halftime here in that second segment was with the Jacksonville Jaguars. And look, I know not many people care about the Jaguars, but I find it interesting to look at organizations, the whole of an organization. How is it run? Is it run poorly? Is it run properly? And there's only 32 NFL organizations, right? I mean, not every state even has an NFL team. You're very lucky if you have an NFL team in your state. North Carolina is on the border, bordered by two states that don't have one, in Virginia and South Carolina. Now, South Carolina, the Carolina Panthers are the Carolina Panthers, so technically the Panthers represent South Carolina as well. So you could say, look at Virginia. Virginia does not have an NFL team. That's tough, so not every team has an NFL team. And when you look at that, it's like, man, you're lucky for your city, your organization, or your community to have an NFL team. And it just sucks when it's so poorly run. It does. Like that's just how it is. It's unfortunate. And the crazy thing is, their owner, Shad Khan, he's a good owner. I mean, he will spend money. He's shown us that. He will spend money if that means that he can bring good players here. But the players aren't staying because they're getting pissed off by management and coaching staff, which just makes me wonder why these people are still in place. And that's the big question here. But I know, again, I'm using that word tanking, that word that these organizations and a lot of these people in these sports communities that are the sports business, I should say, they do not like that word, but it's a word that the Jaguars are clearly doing. And I picked them to be the worst team in the NFL before they started making all these moves. I picked that to happen right away because they just don't have the talent. But when they ship off players left and right like this, and good players, they're trying to tank. Now, it's just not a sure thing because it's the NFL and it's very hard to tank in the NFL. You can ship, like, look at Miami. We went through this. Miami shipped off every player that had some talent. I mean, any type of talent, they got rid of them, right? And of course, if you're in the NFL, you have talent. So it's not like no one else on their team had talent. We saw that clearly because they won 5 games this year. But they shipped off everyone that was a big name because they wanted to get the first overall pick in the draft. And they ended up winning 5 games, which was better than 4 other teams, and they got the 5th pick in the draft. That it's so hard to actually tank and get what you want. But the Jaguars are going for it, but something's got to clean up there, because even if you get that number 1 overall pick, and even if Trevor Lawrence is willing to come there, things have to change. Otherwise, it's just going to be a continuous cycle that just keeps going on and on and on. Look at Cleveland. Cleveland is not changing. And they have so much talent this year, and we'll see. Will this actually be a chance for them to change? I don't know. And that's what we're going to have to find out. So stay tuned. Remember, coming up next quarter, next segment, to end it off, we are going to do the top storylines for week 1. The best storylines going into week 1, not necessarily the best games, just the most intriguing the storylines that we're going to be talking about before the game, the storylines that we're going to be looking at during the game, and the storylines that we're going to be talking about after the game and how they played out. All right. So what we're going to get to here in a second is, like I told you, the top 100, the ESPN did it, and then we're going to get into Ja'Marr Chase. Ja'Marr Chase is the best receiver in college football. He was the best receiver last year. He would be the best receiver this year. He has recently come out and said that he is opting out. So he was going to be a junior this year, and he had to play one more season, and then he could go into the draft at LSU. But he has decided that he is going to opt out and focus on the draft. He has been getting a lot of backlash. I'm going to dive into why you guys should not be giving him backlash and why, or what this means moving forward for college players. Is this going to open up a can of worms? Is this going to be a problem for college football moving forward? We'll get into that in just 1 second. I did want to really quickly just go back what we talked about here with the 2017 draft. You know how I said that it was stacked draft for running backs? I mean, it really, really was a crazy draft when you think about it. And I just wanted to look at these running backs because we're talking about them trying to get paid, right? And, Christian McCaffrey, he got paid. He's the highest paid running back in the league, and he deserved that. But other than that, let's go through the list of all the Leonard Fournette. He's trying to get paid right now, or he just got released. He was going to try and get paid, but he just got released. Dalvin Cook, he's threatening to sit out because he wants a contract that his team's not willing to pay. Alvin Kamara, we just heard big rumors drop today that the Saints are shopping Alvin Kamara because he's not showing up at camp because he wants a bigger contract. Now, this could just be, negotiations talk. They're trying to scare Kamara. They're trying to, put Kamara, say, hey, we're going to trade you if you don't show up or if you don't take the deal. Kamara's not buying into that. The Saints need Kamara. Okay, Drew Brees is in his last year. Drew Brees' arm it has gotten worse by the year now. If Kamara is not on that team, they are not going to make the playoff run that they all and all their fan bases think that they're going to run, that they're going to do. Okay, so he's trying to get paid, right? Kareem Hunt, he hasn't got paid. He had an incident, though, so that's a little bit different. James Conner, there's no contract coming his way. Aaron Jones, I doubt the Packers get close to paying him. They just drafted someone else, a couple of running backs in this past year's draft. Tariq Cohen, no. Marlon Mack. The Colts just drafted Jonathan Taylor, who's supposed to be Mack's replacement, who's supposed to be the number one running back in that. Chris Carson. Is he going to get paid? I doubt the Seahawks do that. That's not the type of organization. Now, Austin Eckler did get paid. Congrats to him, and so did Joe Mixon. And Joe Mixon just got paid today. Once again, that 4-year, $48 million contract, $12 million a year, which puts him right behind the top 5 running backs in the NFL, which if I remember off the top of my head, pay-wise, you got Christian McCaffrey 1 at 16, and then I think Zeke's at $15 million a year, and then I think you have Le'Veon Bell and David Johnson at $13 million a year each. There's one that I'm missing in between them, but I'm not sure. So he puts him in about right with Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry's making $12 million a year. Joe Mixon got that as well, so congrats to him. But just to look, running backs, all these running backs that went in that class, only 2 right now. 3 got paid. That's it. Only Christian McCaffrey, Austin Eckler, and Joe Mixon. That's it. Out of all those running backs that I named you. It's a tough time to be a running back. It really is a tough time to be a running back, and that's unfortunate. All right, now let's jump into this. Like I said, ESPN did a list of their top 100 players entering the 2020 NFL season, and this is really starting to just become a repetitive thing. So I'm going to try not to get too heated and worked up about this because it's just another list. It's another list that is completely disrespectful to my guy Carson Wentz. This is starting to become ridiculous. ESPN ranked the 100 best players going in to the NFL season, and Carson Wentz was ranked 39th out of 100. 39th. Guess where Dak Prescott was ranked? 20th. What is wrong with these people doing these rankings? And this isn't just an ESPN thing. Everywhere out there, it's Dak Prescott over Carson Wentz, and it's not even close. It's slander. Carson Wentz is a better quarterback, and he has proven that every single season. And look, I'm not going to spend too much time on this because if you have been following this show, you don't even have to be following it every episode. If you've just been following it a decent amount, you know where I stand on this debate. And I've given you guys some hardcore facts to explain to you why I stand on this this side of the debate. But I just want to say this real quick because this is becoming a ridiculous statement that's going around. And it's absurd. And it's been well documented what Carson Wentz has accomplished last year. What he did last year was amazing. And I would say this. Carson Wentz has done 2 things in his career that Dak Prescott hasn't even gotten close to doing. Dak Prescott hasn't even gotten close to sniffing. First, Carson Wentz was a runaway MVP candidate. There's no debating that. Carson Wentz in 2017 was a runaway MVP candidate until he got hurt. He was the runaway winner. I mean, it was his. And then he got hurt those last 4 or 5 games, and they couldn't give it to him anymore. But he locked it in before he got hurt. Okay? Dak Prescott has never done that. Dak Prescott has never been even close to winning the MVP award. And he sure as heck has not been halfway or 3/4 through the season the runaway MVP winner. Okay? Not even close. Second, Dak Prescott has never taken his team to the playoffs with all the challenges and injuries surrounding him like Carson Wentz has. Dak Prescott hasn't done that, okay? He hasn't even got close. I would also just say that if you swapped these two players, if you put Wentz on the Cowboys with that roster, that offensive line, that wide receiving core, and you picked up Prescott and dropped him on the Eagles with that roster, I would guarantee that Wentz would have had taken that team to at least the NFC Championship game by now. At least. Okay? I mean, I don't even see how you can't see that. It's clear as day. If Wentz, because we've seen it one time that Wentz had a stacked roster, and that was in 2017, and guess what he did? He was the runaway MVP winner before he got hurt. Dak Prescott has had a stacked roster for the last 2-3 years, and he didn't make the playoffs last year, and it took them a really, really good run towards the end of the year because they started out terrible to make the playoffs the year before. So he is barely squeezing in or not making the playoffs at all with the best offensive line in front of him, with good wide receiver weapons, with a top 3 running back in the league in Ezekiel Elliott. And Wentz is making the playoffs with guys that have at the receiving position that we've never even heard before. Guys that played quarterback in college and had to switch over to receiver. Running backs like Miles Sanders, who's a very good running back, but was a rookie and had to be thrown into that role. It's not even a debate, and I'm tired of the slander to Carson Wentz's name. All right? That needed to be said. Now, let's dive into this news. So, Ja'Marr Chase, LSU's stud wide receiver, has decided to opt out of the 2020 college football season and focus on the draft. This is the GSMC Football Podcast. Remember, coming up in just at the end of this segment, got about 5 minutes or so to go here, we are going to look at the juiciest Week 1 NFL storylines, and then we are going to give you guys our 10th, 9th, and 8th best players in the NFL heading into this 2020 season. So stick around in just a couple minutes for that. Now, Ja'Marr Chase, LSU's wide receiver, as we said, stud wide receiver, opting out of the 2020 season, getting ready for the NFL draft. Remember, LSU is in the SEC, so they are planning on playing college football this season. Ja'Marr Chase decided that it is best for his future to not play and to focus on the draft. I want to be very clear here because I have seen and heard so many people and fans rip this kid. You should be ashamed. Okay? This is a 20-year-old kid. Last season, he won the award for the best wide receiver in all of college football. Last season, as a sophomore, he won that award, and well-deserved. Chase accounted for 84 catches, 1,780 yards, and 20 touchdowns last season. That boy balled out. Ja'Marr Chase balled out 20 touchdowns and 1,780 yards in a college football season. That's absurd. And now he is projected to be a top 5 overall pick this upcoming NFL draft. That is life-changing money. That is generational money, if managed correctly, of course. If he wants to sit out and not risk getting hurt, then he has every single right in the world to do that. That's not selfish to me. And you know what? even if you do want to call that selfish, who the hell cares? He can do what he wants. Okay? He does not deserve to be criticized for it. He just doesn't. I mean, he earned his way. He had a great season. There's a pandemic going on. Some conferences aren't even playing. The season's up in the air. If he doesn't want to play, he shouldn't have to, and she shouldn't have to take criticism from that. From his fans and from random people out there. I understand we live in a day where people criticize everything you do, but I've seen some hateful stuff just because he's not playing for your team, and that's ridiculous. And even if it wasn't a pandemic year, which we're about to get into this in the start of the next segment to dive into a little bit more, but even if it wasn't a pandemic year and this happened, he still shouldn't be criticized. And that's the next question now. This is the bigger part of this, because I think it should be a sure thing that we all understand that you shouldn't criticize this kid. He's a 20-year-old kid. He balled out. He deserved the top 5 draft pick that he's about to get, top 10 at the worst. That's generational money. And if he wants to sit out and work on working on the NFL draft, then he deserves that option because he put in the work. Now, the next part of this, the bigger part of this is, does this open up a can of worms? Does this create a problem that we start to see in college football? Does this start to have other players say, I'm going to sit out. I know I have one more year of eligibility left. I get that and all, but I'm going to sit out and get ready for the draft. Is that going to become a domino effect from what Ja'Marr Chase has done in the future? Are we going to start seeing this in the future of college football? What we're going to do, because I want to dive into this very thoroughly, we're going to take a quick break, and then I'm going to answer that question. And you're going to want to hear that answer, because we're going to go through 2 different parts of this, all right? Because it's a whole different situation when you look at it this year and then when you look at it for years to come, right? So what I'm going to do is we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I'm going to answer that question, and then we're going to dive into Week 1 storylines of the 2020 NFL season. And some of those storylines are really, really juicy. The numbers are out. The matchups are set. The Vegas favorites and underdogs are in. And we're going to talk about them. Stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. GSMC Football Podcast. I am your host, Kayvon Izami. We'll be right back after this.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
This is the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in today. Hope everyone's having a lovely day, enjoying the show, and really, really just having a great time, a great last week or two until we get into the NFL football season, baby. And by the way, I was talking about how we're not going to have football like we usually do on Labor Day weekend this upcoming weekend. And I was wrong. We actually do have football. Again, I was right about it not being the games that we're used to, the USCs against the Alabamas, the Oregons against Auburns, which that game was awesome last year, those big-time games. But we are going to get we've got 2 games on Thursday, this upcoming Thursday, and then we have 6 games on Saturday. And then probably the most known game is that Monday, Labor Day Monday, which is BYU at Navy. So that right there should probably tell you that the games are not really big name games, but hey, it's college football and we can't complain. So, we're going to get the SMU playing, who had a decent team last year. Memphis is going to be playing against Arkansas State. Marshall's playing against Eastern Kentucky, Middle Tennessee at Army. It's those types of games, smaller FCS, smaller type schools, but it's college football. It's something to be thankful for, and we just have to hope that these players and these students are able to stay safe and healthy, and that they start off good so that when these big programs come in, it looks like it can really, really happen here. So that's something we'll have to keep an eye on as we go. And again, I hope everyone has a safe and lovely holiday weekend. And then when we come back, when you come back on that Monday, that Tuesday, it's officially week 1 of the NFL season. Get those rosters ready to go. Get those lineups ready to go. And don't make the mistake like us. And, we actually have a very legit fantasy league, so I don't want this to sound rookie by any means at all, but we do our draft always the weekend before Labor Day weekend, because a lot of people in our group in our league goes out of town, right? And which just makes sense. It's Labor Day weekend. A lot of people make plans and stuff like that. But we do our draft in person. It's something we do. We don't do it online. We do an offline draft, and then as the commissioner, I enter everything in the next day. So we do it the weekend before Labor Day weekend, which is always a problem because something always ends up happening. Look, like since then, we've had Leonard Fournette get released, who is a number 1 running back. He just got released, so who knows where he goes, and is that going to affect, that's clearly going to affect either in a good way or a worse way the person that dropped him. And, Alvin Kamara, he might get traded. That's a that's a top 4, top 5 pick. Those type of things does Dalvin Cook sign a contract, But that's fantasy. That's what happens. You have to be prepared. You have to be ready to have their backups available if you're going to take these players high up. But that's something that, I always will give advice. If you're able to with your league, do it either the weekend of Labor Day weekend or the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, right before that Thursday night. You can do it Thursday morning, Thursday afternoon, or even Thursday evening right before that game and make sure everyone's lineups are set. That's really how you should do it, because even for preseason, if it's a regular season, players get hurt and all that stuff. So, just something that is advice for us, for people that have screwed up like my league, but that is what it is. So we were just talking about college football and Jamar Chase, star wide receiver at LSU, sitting out, opting out this season, foregoing his junior year so we can get ready to play in the NFL. He had a phenomenal, one of the best college football wide receiver seasons we've seen in a long time. He was the best wide receiver in the country. He was the best wide receiver on the best team that won the national championship last year. And he made his mark and he said, I'm done. I'm going to chill this season. There's a lot going on, and I'm going to work on my game for the NFL draft. And again, I respect that. I respect that a lot, actually. And there is no reason to criticize him. He has every single right. He's 20 years old to make that decision. And a lot of you, including myself, would probably make that same exact decision if you were in his spot. Because you see that 10 million, 20 million, 15 million, depending on where he goes, guaranteed coming into your bank account if you don't get hurt or screw anything up. And he doesn't want to take that risk because why? Why? He already won a national championship. He already put up insane stats. Don't criticize him for this move. Do not criticize him for doing what's right for him and his family moving forward, because we all know we would do the same thing when it comes putting our family and our future and our success first. So the big question is, though, because that's the easy part of this, everyone with some sense should be on board with what I just said there. But now becomes a much bigger question, and that is, does this create a domino effect? Does this create an issue moving forward? Does this create something that college football is going to have to really worry about, like the whole bowl game thing? You remember we started having guys after Jalen Smith, the really good linebacker who thank goodness, he recovered, but he played in a pointless bowl game for Notre Dame a couple years ago and tore his knee up in so many different ways that no one even knew if he was going to be able to really play football again. And luckily he rehabbed and he got better, and he's one of the best linebackers in the league on the Cowboys, but he was a lock top 5 pick, and he ended up going in the second round. That cost himself millions in playing a bowl game that really doesn't mean much. So we started to see after that a lot of college players sitting out of those bowl games. But no one really had a problem with that because, again, they were just simple bowl games. No players were sitting out of the national championship game or the semifinals games or anything like that. So it hasn't been a big issue. So could this move that Ja'Marr Chase did, could that open up a bigger issue? Could that open up a can of worms? Now, are more college football players going to start doing this in the future? That's the question. Ball out for 1 year, then sit out and get ready for the NFL draft. So let's not look at this year, because this year is an outlier with the pandemic, and more players are going to opt out because of that in itself and just not worth taking the risk, right? So let's not look at this year. But the question becomes the future years, the years to follow when the pandemic is over. And to be honest, I think the answer is yes and no. I know that's probably not the best sports radio answer for you in this day of we must have hot takes or else, and take a side or else. So I'm taking both sides here. I'm saying screw that. I'm taking both sides, and this is why. Hear me out. First of all, it's not going to be a major problem going forward because just like COVID and the year of 2020 being an outlier, so is Ja'Marr Chase. Everybody won't be in the same luxury position that Chase played himself in. All right, this guy is a top 5 pick, at worst top 10. Let's look at the stats again. 20 touchdowns, 84 catches, 1,780 yards. How is he going to beat that? There is literally no upside in Chase playing. LSU doesn't have as good of a team. They're not repeating as national champions. He's not putting up those stats again. There's just no way. So there is no upside. So moving forward, there won't be that many athletes that have this type of season. So for the majority of college football players, the answer is no. This won't open up a domino effect because this is an anomaly player. This was an anomaly season, and he played himself into a beautiful situation. That's not going to happen to 99% of college football players. Now, this is where things change, though. Let's look at COVID-19. COVID has taught everyone a lot across every industry, right? Across all the world, different industries. Look at me. I'm hosting this podcast in my bedroom right now. Why? Because there's a pandemic and I can't go in the studio, right? But my show is going just fine. You can hear me clear. There's not any background noise. There's not any echoing. My show's going fine. And I'm not doing it in the actual GSMC studios. So now companies realize, wait a second, you can host meetings on your phone. You can host meetings on your computer. There are a lot of companies across the nation that have realized, wait a second, we don't need this big, expensive building where people need to come into work. When you can just work from home and you can be efficient doing it as well. I think college football players are going to say the same thing. They're going to say, wait a second. After Ja'Marr Chase goes top 10 overall and didn't play his last year of necessary mandated eligibility, they're going to say, wait a second. Didn't Justin Fields just go top 5 overall after not playing his last year of necessary mandated eligibility? They're going to say, wait a second. If I can sit out my final year and still go in the top 10, then I have very minimal to gain by going back to school. But dang, do I have a lot to lose. I mean, a whole lot to lose if I go back. So I think that part will have a huge collateral effect on how we view college football. But again, that is for the 1% of players, if that. That are for the players that are surefire, lock, top 5, top 10 players. You don't get that a lot. You do not get that a lot. And most of those players that are quarterbacks. And we don't ever see quarterbacks do that. Because quarterbacks are supposed to be the leader, and if they sit out, then they start to question their leadership. I think that's wrong, but that's just how it is. So, my answer is yes and no. I don't think it's going to happen to the point of we have a huge problem in college football, but I do think it could happen to the best of the best when a season like this happens, which will be an every so once in a while, once a year, once every 2 years outlier type situation. This is the GSMC Football Podcast. I am your host, Kayvon Izami, coming down the final stretches of the show today. I want to get in a couple of these juiciest Week 1 storylines, and then we will go from there and give you guys our 10th, 9th, and 8th best players in the NFL going into this 2020 season. So, first storyline, and this one I just have to bring up, and I'm sorry, Bears fans. I'm sorry. I'm kind of doing this just to taunt you. Juiciest Week 1 storylines. Ready? Texans versus Chiefs. Opening night. Couple reasons. One, how do you watch this? If you're a Bears fan, seriously, how do you watch this? We went through this earlier. Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson, both up for grabs. I told you, don't blame me for not taking Mahomes, but both up for grabs. And they're going to be battling it out on opening night of the NFL season. And Bears fans are going to be sitting there saying, our quarterback, Mitchell Trubisky, is in a battle right now with Nick Foles, and we don't even know if he can win it. That is depressing for Bears fans. That is depressing, and I'm sorry to be mean, but it's humorous. It's humorous. Another reason why this is an awesome storyline is because this is the generation of football. That's why make no mistakes about it. This is why the NFL put this matchup on. You know they could have put the Ravens. The Chiefs play the Ravens, right? And Lamar Jackson, he is the future of football too. There's no doubt about it. But Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes, and then you can add Lamar into that mix. But those two and then Lamar, so I guess those three are the up and coming quarterbacks. They're the future of the NFL. They are here now, some of them. But they are the future of the NFL, and they're the next quarterbacks that we're going to be watching for the next 10 plus years. And the NFL knows that, and that's why they scheduled this game. And it is a fun topic. It is a fun storyline to watch. And Deshaun Watson, you better believe, even though Patrick Mahomes has the accolades already and the MVP and the Super Bowl ring, Deshaun Watson knows how to win himself. And he's ready to show on the biggest stage on the opening night that he can beat Patrick Mahomes. That's one big storyline. The second one, tie right back into the Bears, is the Bears at the Lions. And I know, you hear those teams and you say, what are you talking about, Kayvon? That is not very sexy teams right there. But I'm very intrigued in this game, and there's a big if. I'm very intrigued in this game for one reason only. If Mitchell Trubisky is playing. I don't care to watch Nick Foles. I want to see if Trubisky is a legit QB in this league moving forward or not. I already know that Foles is a journeyman who got really lucky one NFL postseason, and that's it. His book is written, okay? I hate to be, his book is written. Trubisky's is not written yet. Trubisky showed us that when he is used properly and when he is healthy and when you open up his legs and let him run, he can actually do some things as an NFL quarterback. Is head coach Matt Nagy going to allow that to happen? Is head coach Matt Nagy going to think that Trubisky's going to beat out Foles in training camp? And if so, I'm glued to that game because Detroit, while I think they can be a surprise team of the year, I still think that the Bears should be able to handle them and have a good game versus them. I also like this because Matt Stafford, I think, and we're going to do bold predictions at some point, and this might be in it, but I think Matt Stafford is set up to have his best NFL season of his entire career this year. That is the second storyline that I'm looking at. Next one is Cleveland Browns versus Baltimore Ravens. Let's talk about some storylines here. Matchup between two former Heisman Trophy winning QBs, right? Who also went in the first round. Baker Mayfield, number 1 overall, and Lamar Jackson, number 32 overall. Jackson won the Heisman in 2016. Mayfield won it in 2017. The number 32 overall quarterback has taken his team to the playoffs twice in 2 years and has won the MVP already. The other one has not, the number 1 overall has not made the playoffs yet. You know that whenever Lamar plays this team, he wants to show Baker and the Browns that they made a big mistake on passing him. This is a game that I love to see because it's a division game, lots of offense on both sides of the ball, and that quarterback battle, Mayfield is going to want to show that, hey, he can actually do something in this league, but Lamar is going to be motivated already from that terrible playoff loss this last year to Tennessee, and then that he is the number 32 overall pick, and the guy on the other team is number 1, and that team skipped Lamar. Great storyline there. And then last one we're going to do before we jump into our 10, 9, and 8 best player in the NFL. The Raiders, the Las Vegas Raiders versus the Carolina Panthers. And this is an interesting note here. Ready? Teddy Bridgewater, drafted number 32 overall. Derek Carr, drafted number 36 overall in 2014. They were the 3rd and 4th QBs drafted in that draft class. You want to know who went 1st and 2nd? Blake Bortles and Johnny Manziel. Blake Bortles is, I think, a backup on the Rams right now, and Manziel is nowhere to be found playing football. Those two, and I just want to point this out to prove how inexact this football, this drafting is. Those two are not playing. You know, I know Bortles is on a roster, but Manziel's out, and Bridgewater and Carr are starting week 1 against each other for two teams.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Thomas, I think he's a very good receiver. I think he's the 2nd best receiver in the entire NFL behind Julio Jones, and he is my 10th best player. He has a big impact, and he helps them win games, and he catches a lot of balls, but he doesn't have a big enough impact for me to go higher. I haven't seen him do it on the biggest stage, and while he puts up lots of numbers, I need to see him do it when the playoffs are there, when the moment's shining the brightest, and will he be able to do it once Drew Brees is gone? And this is Drew Brees' last year. I want to see that first. Still, 2nd best receiver in the entire league. Michael Thomas is my 10th best player in the entire NFL. Number 9, Khalil Mack, a straight up beast. All right, this guy is just You can't, you can't even, he's made in a lab. He looks so big. He does not look normal. All right. He is a monster. He played for the Raiders a couple years, got traded to the Bears. 2018, 12.5 sacks, 1 interception, 1 touchdown. Last year, he dropped down a little bit, 8.5 sacks, but he is still someone that every team has to game plan all week to stop him. And I love watching this guy play. He is my 9th best player in the NFL. And number 8 is Stephon Gilmore. Stephon Gilmore is he's the best cornerback in the league, in my opinion. And he's so intriguing to me because he's the one defensive player. Really, he's the one player other than Tom Brady that I have seen Bill Belichick really pay the big bucks for. That shows how good he is, and that shows how important he is to this team and how much Bill Belichick respects his talent. In 2019, he had 6 interceptions. He had two touchdowns, ran 2 of them back for pick sixes. You don't see a lot of quarterbacks do what he does. He plays the best receiver the entire game. He's locked down on his own island over there, and Bill Belichick can just let him be because he knows he's going to lock things down. He's the best quarterback in the league, in my opinion, and he is the 8th best player in the entire NFL through all positions going into this 2020 season. This is the GSMC Football Podcast. I am your host, Kayvon Izami. I hope everyone had an awesome show. I hope everyone really enjoyed the show today. We are now getting down to 2 shows left before we have kickoff. And I hope you guys are really excited about it. So thank you so much for listening to the GSMC Football Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That has always helped us. We love the reviews that we've gotten so far. Also, if you can, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you. Have a good night. Have a great and safe Labor Day weekend.